Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and very happy to have in the studio with me Charles Sauer, the libertarian economist and president of the Market Institute. The website is marketinstitute.org. You can tweet him at Market Institute, or if you want to get his personal Twitter, it's Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R.
Yep.
You don't mind if people tweet you at your...
I rather it at my personal one. That's where.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
the conversation's better.
Yeah.
There.
Okay. So tweet Charles at Charles. You know, if you're going to tweet him to beat him up, you know. Do it at Market Institute if you're going to. No, I'm joking. Charles, S-A-U-E-R, is Sauer. So here we've got, Charles, let's talk economics, as we seem to do every week. We've got the Trump administration trying to put together a tax program, you know, tax cuts and whatnot. And apparently they've enlisted Chris Christie, whose state just went through its 11th credit downgrade to be a significant part of this. But
not a good hire. Yeah,
well, you know, I'm not certain how real that story is. I've just seen it in a couple of places, so we'll see. But the bottom line from my point of view is that tax policy is government/social policy. That we use taxes, you know, historically, the idea was we'd use taxes to raise revenue for the government. Although we didn't even have an income tax until 1913, it was always tariffs. Tariffs paid for all of the government until Lincoln, paid for half of the government until Woodrow Wilson, paid for a third of the government until the 1950s, basically. The tariffs did. And then we started doing away with tariffs, and it went to income tax. And so, you know, there are behaviors that we want to encourage. Like we want to encourage people to buy houses.
Yep.
Or at least that's what the banks and the housing industry wanted. So they lobbied to get an exemption from taxation for interest income.
I was going to say the liberals wanted, since that's who gets the majority of the benefit from that. But
well,
yes.
it was Republicans who passed it during the Eisenhower administration. So, you know, they wanted to grow America. They wanted more people to own homes. They saw that as a social good.
Completely agree.
So, yeah. So whether it's right or not, because I'm a little squirrely about that. But whether it's right or not, we do tax policy really more for reasons of social policy and good governance, and the general welfare of the people, to quote the Constitution's preamble.
Like healthcare tax credits.
Yeah, exactly. Well, whatever. I mean, you know, if there's a behavior you want to encourage, you do it. And so with a top tax rate of 74% prior to 1986, the behavior that we encouraged among the very, very rich was don't steal all the money, or don't take all the money. You know, leave that money in your company. The average CEO in 1985 was making 30 times what his average employee makes. Now the average CEO makes around 500 times what his average employee makes. And in some industries like banking, it can be 10,000 times what the average employee makes. And it just seems to me like we've lost sight of why we have the tax policies that we have, and that we really should be saying, what are our social goals? Is inequality something that's destructive to our society? I think there's a huge body of evidence that indicates that that's the case. So let's use tax policy to lessen inequality, for example.
I mean, the inequality is an interesting topic. And I think that the numbers that you used are interesting. But I think that what those do is really undermine the long-run conversation that happens on inequality. And that's because the numbers are just skewed. The fact is, you likely have more wealth than I do, but you also have more years of experience under you, and we're both doing well. So I'm not complaining about where I'm at. I'm not complaining where you're at, but you should have more wealth than I do just based on the years. And so when we talk about the inequality numbers, the normal numbers compare you and I, and that doesn't make sense.
But we're talking apples and oranges here. I'm talking about billionaires and multi-billionaires and people who are earning. I mean, you got 20 people on Wall Street who earned more than $1 billion last year. What the hell? What? I mean, you know, we don't pay brain surgeons $1 billion a year. What on God's green earth is worth, you know, shuffling stocks around on Wall Street is worth $1 billion? Come on, Charles.
They're shuffling it around, and I mean, look, I don't have calluses on my hands. I am not out working outdoors every day. I did to help pay my way through college on the weekends. I did do outdoor work. I did wait tables. I did do things that were hard, but I now don't have those calluses on my hands. When people are outside working, that is hard labor. What we do, thinking and writing, might not be hard labor, but it's some form of work that is there. I don't think that I do think what Wall Street is doing is work. It's hard to define, but they're investing in plants that Trump is bringing back or keeping in America.
These guys who are making $1 billion on Wall Street are not investing in anything. You know that. Well, they're skimming money off the top as they churn the market.
They're churning the market in an effective direction.
But, you know, we're
back to inequality.
Back in the weeds.
Can I go back to inequality?
Sure.
So there's all of the numbers that you have are there. They're real and out there. But when you actually compare it back to ages, you drop the inequality percentage down to, I think it's either 7 or 14%, where inequality is still real and significant, but the number is much less than the numbers that the left uses. And that's research that was done by Auerbach and Kotlikoff. I mean, these are real economists.
Well, and I would refer you to the Marshall Auerbach. I know Marshall Auerbach. He does some really great work. I would suspect that there's more to that research than what you just said.
That's their tax model that he just came out with Kotlikoff.
If you look at the consequences of high levels of inequality, first of all, we're at a level of inequality we haven't seen since 1929. High levels of inequality tend to destabilize economies. They're top heavy, basically. They fall over harder and easier, number one. Number two, if you look at the research that's been done by, well,
let me start with the top-heavy
out of the UK. Well, every index of social ill, you know, the more unequal a society is, the more likely you are to have drug addiction, the more likely you are to have clinical depression, the more likely you are to have suicide, the more likely you are to have crime, the more likely you are, you know, there's just this whole host of social ills that always accompany high levels of inequality.
Those are social ills that accompany having extra money. Those are social ills that accompany having extra time. Those are social ills that come from a prosperous economy.
No, mostly they come from poverty.
If you can solve all of those problems, if we don't have a prosperous economy, we can solve the problems of immigration for the right just by not having a good economy. When we have a bad economy, we have less illegal immigrants. So maybe that's something that the left agrees with the right on, that we should have a bad economy. But economists want economic growth, right? So we want a better economy. And, you know, when people have extra money to spend, they end up spending it on something.
You want to double the GDP? You want to double the GDP of Washington, D.C.?
I would love to double the GDP, but I'm not going to do it by stealing money from other people.
If God forbid somebody were to drop a bomb on Washington, D.C., you'd double the GDP because they'd have to rebuild the city. You know, for example, and you know, if you want to double the GDP of Washington State, have a forest fire that burns down all the trees. You know,
it's called broken window economics. You can't walk down Main Street and make the world money. Right? You've just walked down Main Street breaking out windows.
Is a lousy measure.
And make the world money.
My point is that GDP saying, oh, we just want growth. We want to increase GDP. As Bobby Kennedy pointed out back in 1967, GDP measures everything that's not important to us and doesn't measure the stuff that is important to us: the quality of our relationships, the strength of our neighborhoods, the quality of our families, the commitment to governance that we have.
A qualification. Let's quantify these things. And when you try to quantify it, you can claim that GDP isn't the number to do it. That's fine. Let's fight and find a different number to do it on. There's different numbers that we can use. We can look at consumer price indexes. We can do whatever. I'm fine with moving on to a different quantifiable subject. But if you're just going to do it on something that's qualified, now you're talking about a political game. And that's something that corporate America is always going to win, because they're going to put out the message to win that. This is a great quality neighborhood because, big corporation X is funding it.
What I was thinking of earlier was Richard Wilkerson and Kate Pickett, who wrote a book called The Spirit Level. And prior to that, they wrote a book called Why Inequality Matters. They're British economists or researchers. And they literally went state by state in the United States. The more unequal a state is in the United States, the worse all their social indices are. The more equal a state is in the United States, the better their social indices are. Then they did it with the entire world, the exact same results. So why not use tax policy? Why not roll back the Reagan tax cuts and go back to saying, if you make $3 million a year, cool. But if you're making over $3 million a year, you're going to start paying 74% income tax on that, which will encourage you, since, to cap your income at $3 million, so money stays in the company, so you can pay people well. I mean, back when GM stockholders and executives were looking at those really high taxes, they had no problem paying their workers, in today's dollars, $45, $50 an hour. What's GM paying new workers right now? $9, $10 an hour. Because they're, the stockholders and the CEOs can take all that money at a low tax rate.
Most of those jobs are gone because the union had negotiated these rates, and now they dropped the jobs.
Yes, it does.
That's why we have the Rust Belt, because they don't have jobs.
No, it's because Reagan changed our tax policies.
That is no
and our trade policies.
Look, Reagan's tax policies here have been repeated around the world. We have Reagan Revolution 2.0.
And particularly in the UK, actually Reagan stole the stuff from Thatcher, not the other way around. Thatcher started this 2 years before Reagan. And now the UK is the other country that has a massive inequality problem and has all these spreading social ills as a consequence of it. So
ask the countries that don't have the inequality problem if they would like to have the U.S.
I think I've been very clear about what I think we should, what our tax policies should be focused around. In the minute we have left, what do you think our tax policies should be focused around?
So I remember the birth of my thought process on tax policy was Ross Perot and his big ears and his postcard sheet.
Well, that was trade, not income tax.
Well, no, it was income tax, because he said if you make above this mark, you pay this much, and if you make below this mark, you don't pay anything.
Right.
And that was Ross Perot's simple message. That's not the tax plan that I would be with, but simplifying the tax code, not claiming that a postcard is the way to go, but simplifying the tax code. And in some cases,
well, how is simplicity, a virtue in and of itself?
Well, you end the mortgage interest deduction rate, which does nothing but
support the middle class.
It supports the middle class. You end
So you want to end the tax break for the middle class? You're going to keep the tax break for the oil companies?
No, you end the tax break on the oil companies. You end subsidies and tax breaks for energy companies, because why?
So
now
you don't think we should be doing social engineering with tax policy?
I think we would have a better economy if we were not trying to socially engineer with tax policy.
Would we have a better society? Isn't that the whole point of government?
I think that's a good question for another day.
Okay, for another day. Charles Sauer. You can tweet him at Charles Sauer. It's marketinstitute.org.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks for dropping by.
Thank you.
Great having you. We'll be right back.